They live is partially a political statement, it's partially a tract on the world that we live in today. And as a matter of fact, right now, it's even more true than it was then. We are manipulated by a lot of media around us. We are consumed by consumerism. And as you can see in the recent events in this country, they are still among us. They do live.
Our impulses are being redirected. We are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. They have created a repressive society, and we are their unwitting accomplices. Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
The truth hurts because the truth is all there is. The truth hurts because the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, because the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, 'cause the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth, because the truth is all there is. You can't hide from the truth. You can't hide.
Welcome to the show that explores the social dynamics and psychological forces that shape our world, much like the pecking order in a chicken coop. Why is society structured in rigid hierarchies? Why do we instinctively follow authority? And how is our belief in this structure manipulated to control us? We'll explore the layers of social conditioning, the psychology behind obedience, the hidden mind control techniques that influence our lives, and the universal moral laws that stand in stark contrast to manufactured authority. This is the Coop Files. Welcome everyone. Today's date is Thursday, the 11th of December 2025. It's been a while since my last presentation, which I've had a look back at, and I think I was a little bit angry, a little bit under the weather, a little bit angry, understandably so I think, in the clown world that we live in, frustration, and I think I've tried to self-reflect and be a bit self-critical, and I think sometimes I lose focus and lose my point, so I'm going to try and take that on board. I don't know if that's the feedback that anybody else would also give us, but I'm going to try and take that on board. I'm going to try and speed up a little bit as well. 4 hours is a bit long, so let's see how that goes. And I think I might split this presentation into two or three parts, just to try and break it up. I'll also put a chapter into the film, into the actual video, so you can skip this rambling at the beginning if you've heard it before and you don't want to listen to it again. So as usual, I'll start with the housekeeping. Who is this show for? It's for me. ultimately, it's for me, my frustration, my lack of faith in humanity, not having a voice. Nobody wants to listen to anything you've got to say, so I'll just speak to a camera instead. If anybody wants to listen, great. I'd like to try and put some valid knowledge and wisdom out there, but you can only meet people where they are. So who's the show not for? That's a bigger list. The statists, those who have unwavering loyalty to the state. The conformists, those who go along just to get along, regardless of the betrayal to their self. The authoritarians, those who love authority, they love rules and they love enforcing them. The atheist left-brainers, the closed-minded, those who do not want to look at anything that might challenge their egotistical, firmly held beliefs. They think their opinion is the truth. The emotionally and spiritually immature, we'll cover that a lot in this presentation. The crybabies, this thin-skinned, please don't say that, it hurts. I don't like the emotional impact your words and tone is having on me. Those opposed to the truth, who enjoy their comfort, those who love their servitude. They don't want the truth, they want comfort. They want to watch sports and be entertained. The self-loathing, those that hate themselves so much that they have no thirst for truth or for knowledge or for growing as an individual. The show's definitely not for them. And again, we'll cover a lot of these types of people in this presentation. What have we covered so far? I think this is episode 8 now. My goal was to do one a month. I'm pretty much on target for that. I think my first one was in April. I'd like to speed up over time, but we'll see. So what have we covered so far? Authority is a man-made religion which does not exist in nature. We live in a cult where belief systems control the members of the cult, and anyone who speaks the truth is attacked and demonized. Freedom is achieved by being objectively moral. Morality is enshrined into nature and acts as a moral, natural law. Fear leads to obedience to authority, which outsources personal responsibility and leads to control. Religion and materialism are two wings of the same bird. Most people are controlled within their own mind by the reptile or mammalian brain. So that's what we've covered so far. If you haven't watched those episodes, please check them out. Before we start today's presentation, I just want to cover a little personal anecdote, and I'm just going to have to give a very brief background to this story. It's just a little story which has really made my day the other day. So a little bit of background. So we have a 15-year-old daughter. Our daughter was 10/11 during the 2020 PSYOP, and she was involved. She was fully, we fully included her and informed her in relation to what was going on. Obviously we treaded carefully, but we certainly weren't going to lie to her. She joined us on the freedom marches, the stand in the parks, talks that we attended and things like that. She was on board with the whole thing, and she kind of understood what was going on. I mean, you've got to be careful. 10, 11-year-old. But anyway, and this story is obviously fitting for the theme of this presentation as well, adolescence and consciousness. So anyway, fast forward. Obviously we promote freedom as far as our daughter is concerned. We encourage her to take personal responsibility, and the more personal responsibility you take, the more freedom you will be given, and that's what we do. And we're teaching her in the micro within the family what actually happens in the macro, and if you take that understanding and that wisdom into the world, collectively that's what we can achieve, and that's what we've instilled into her as a young child, and then through her adolescence. Anyway, so she came to us the other day and said that she wants to go. She's 15 now. She wants to go to Leeds Music Festival next year, where she'll be 16. And this is one of those music festivals, all weekend. You go in a tent and you stink by the end of it, and all the rest of it. She wants to go to one of those music festivals, and obviously her mum and I are cautious, but we said we'd think about it, and we can discuss it over time. It's not off the table, but it's not a definite yes, and we'll see where we go with that. So the other day, so a few days or maybe a week or so after this, when she broached the subject, she turns up. She comes down to the pub with us, and we're meeting a couple of friends who are also open-minded and freedom orientated. And she pulls out her little laptop, and she gets everybody's attention, and she says, "I've got a presentation to make." Not only has she got a presentation, a persuasive presentation as she calls it, but it's a full 20-slide PowerPoint presentation on why she should be allowed to go to Leeds Music Festival, and she delivered it in what can only be described as a Coop Files type presentation, full PowerPoint, the works. And I was just thinking, where did she get this from? Who knows? It's a mystery. So anyway, she delivers this presentation, and we were just totally blown away. It had all of the persuasive arguments. She's done research on the festival. She's done research on campsites that we could stay nearby, so we could be close. She's researched the location of the campsites, what facilities they've got, blah blah blah. Anyway, there was this one slide which just blew us away, is the only way I can describe it, and I just thought, I'm going to have to put that slide in my next presentation, and it actually fits perfectly. Let me just put that slide on. So this was section 3, part 3 of her presentation, and she's entitled it Freedom. And, well, I'll just read it out. For 15 years, I haven't been able to have a full choice on things outside of your comfort zone, which is understandable at a certain age, but risks are never going to change no matter how old I get. I think it would eventually be time for us to all go out of our comfort zone for a weekend, instead of acting like I'm a china pot with a bull in the shop. You say I'm mature now and praise it a lot, so Leeds Fest is 1 year away. Who's to say I wouldn't be even more mature then? And then this was the bit. Life has risks. That's how it works. You'll never get away from them. It's part of life. And I just thought, wow, she gets it She totally gets it. There is no such thing as safety. It's an illusion. Freedom comes with risks and personal responsibility. And at just 15, I mean, you tell me, is that where your average 15-year-old is? This is all just out of her own head. I asked her, did you research this? Did you type it into Google? And no, just all from her head. It's all what she's picked up and taken on board from how we speak to her and how we teach her about freedom and natural law. And I just thought, as proud as Punch on one hand, but on the other hand, this is where we are. This is where we are as a society when, in order to have a philosophical conversation about the nature of reality and actually be, tethered into reality, in order to have this type of conversation outside of our mother or one or two close friends, I have to have it with a 15-year-old. I can't have that conversation with your average adult. It's lost. And I just thought, I'm going to use that quote from now on to open up. Life has risks, that's how it works. You'll never get away from them. It's part of life. Daisy, aged 15. So, what are we going to cover? 3 parts and an appendix. We're going to cover the question is, adolescence and consciousness. Why do most adults never wake up? Wake up is a term that I particularly dislike. I think it's just got it's overused, and I don't think people understand really what it means, and we're going to explore that. We're going to explore what do we mean by wake up in the true, real meaning of the phrase. And we're going to look at what adolescence is, and most people know what adolescence is, or they believe they've got a good idea of what adolescence is. And I'm going to explore the link between the two. And I'm going to explore the idea or the truth that adolescence is a key part of waking up, and it's actually a part of a natural process that humans go through in order to actually protect them from potential control systems. The process of adolescence is there to turn people from a child into an adult, a fully functioning, awake, aware adult. So we're gonna look at the whole process. We're going to look at, in part 2, trauma and the effects of trauma on adolescence or pre-adolescence and how that has an impact. Part 3, we're going to look at the uninitiated, people who have not awakened, and then I'm going to come to a conclusion and what the solution to this problem is. Why do most adults never wake up? Solutions. And then the appendix, we're going to look at your own, have an opportunity to look at your own level of consciousness and assess where you're at, and really just explore what consciousness is and how it plays out in the physical world. So what do we mean wake up? So there's four. I'm using a couple of models here. This one is just to give a very quick overview of consciousness. In this model, there's 4 states of consciousness, and there's a line there you can see, and below the line, the lower base levels of consciousness are ego and fear driven, and these are people who feel like life happens to me, victimized. They feel victimized and helpless. They have no power. They are just victim mentality. Or life happens by me. They think they have control over everything. Things happen because you make them happen. They're highly driven, but ego driven. Above that line is trust, love, motivation. This is where you understand that life happens through you. You're here for a reason and have purpose. You're in touch with your higher power. It's much more empowering once you go above that base level. Life, and then at the top there, life happens as me. There is no separation between you and spirit, and you and others. We are one. You operate from compassion and are an extension of everything. So the collective consciousness we are all tapped into. We are just experiencing it through the physical meat suit that we happen to inhabit for a brief period of time. You are not the meat suit. You are consciousness, awareness. And the other model that we're going to use and focus on more is Dr. Hawkins' scale of consciousness. It's a framework he developed in his book Power versus Force, where he mapped human consciousness levels on a logarithmic scale from 1 to 1,000. The idea is that different thoughts, emotions and behaviors correspond to different energy or consciousness levels, with higher levels associated with greater truth, love and awareness, and lower levels associated with fear, anger or shame. And there's a brief overview of the key levels there. It's upside down, but it doesn't matter. It starts at shame at the bottom. Shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride. And I've highlighted courage there. Courage is the critical threshold, empowerment and integrity. That's where everything changes. At the level of courage. Again, we're going to talk about that a lot as we move on. So you can pause the screen there if you want to read the rest of them, but I'm not going to go through them in too much detail at this point. So that's what we mean by consciousness. The level and the quality of your thoughts, your emotions and your behaviors, or your actions. Your thoughts, your emotions and your actions. The quality determines the level of your awareness and where you're at and how you see the world, and whether or not you can discern truth from falsehood. So what is adolescence? Adolescence is the bridge between childhood and adulthood. a process of transformation, not just physical change. It involves redefining identity, morality, and purpose. The core idea is about moving from dependence to autonomy, from innocence to awareness. There's that word, awareness, consciousness, dependence to autonomy. Many traditions treated adolescence as a sacred transition, an initiation into conscious participation in life, a sacred transition. It's a shame we don't treat it like that in our culture. Changes in the brain. The human brain is not finished developing by the time a person reaches puberty or even finishes it. The frontal lobe of the brain has been known to shape itself well into one's 30s. Neuroscientists often cannot agree precisely on when this developmental period ends, or if there is an exact age for the end of brain development. So keep that in mind. It could be in somebody's 30s. And when is somebody legally an adult? 16, 17, 18? As far as the fake legal system is concerned. Over the course of adolescence, through a process called synaptic pruning, unnecessary neuronal connections in the brain are eliminated and the amount of grey matter is pared down. However, this does not mean that the brain loses functionality. Rather, it becomes more efficient due to increased myelination and the reduction of unused pathways. So just to kind of re-summarize that, what happens during the period of adolescence is the frontal lobe is developing, the part of the neocortex, and the brain is pruning itself like a tree. Dead branches, you cut off the dead branches to make the tree more efficient and healthier. Well, when I say healthier, I mean it doesn't, as far as the tree is concerned, you don't want it taking up water from the ground or sunlight through the leaves and sending that energy to parts of the tree which are not used or dead branches. So you prune it, it becomes more efficient and it grows better. The brain, so what's happening in the brain is if certain pathways aren't being used during this stage of adolescence, then the brain prunes them and stops using them. So if you don't use a certain part of your brain during that period, if you're not trained to use that part of your brain, if you don't think in a certain way, if you don't develop certain ways of thinking and using this part of your brain, then the brain will prune away those connections. In other words, at the end of adolescence, whatever age that is, the pruning kind of sets you for the rest of your adulthood, and that's your personality, and that's how you think, and that's how your brain works. Your brain is not your enemy. It doesn't do this because it wants you to suffer. It does it because that's your habit, that's what you've done. You've trained your brain to work in a certain way, whether you're aware of it or not, and your brain will say, well, if that's how you want me to work, I'll just shut the rest down and then I'll work ultra efficiently in the way that you want me to work. So if you haven't learned how to critically think, if you haven't learned morality, if you haven't learned all of the other thinking techniques that we're going to cover, then you'll likely go on through the rest of your life never ever being that fully matured adult, because your brain isn't working like a fully matured adult's brain. But it's important to point out that it doesn't mean that your brain loses functionality. It can still do those things. It just means it's going to take a lot of work to reopen those pathways, but they can be reopened. The brain, it has plasticity. It's like plastic. It can be molded and reshaped, and these pathways can open up if you start to use them. But that it would be hard work. That's, set in your mind, or they're set in their mind. Oh, they're too old, they can't change. No, they're set in their mind. They can't change because it would take a huge amount of work to change. It would be, a lot of mental energy to get those pathways working again. Imagine you filled in a tunnel, and 50 years later, somebody says, go and dig that tunnel out. Imagine how much effort and energy it would take to dig that tunnel back out. You could do it, but how many people are going to do that and say, no, I'll just go another way? That's how the brain works. And that's what's going on through adolescence. It's developing, forming, and creating all of these different pathways that are going to set you in good stead for the rest of your adult life, allegedly. Well, I'm saying allegedly as in not for everybody, it doesn't, which we'll see. We'll cover as the presentation goes on. The first areas of the brain to be pruned are those involving primary functions such as motor and sensory areas. Some of the most developmentally significant changes in the brain occur in the prefrontal cortex, which is involved in decision making and cognitive control, as well as other high cognitive functions. During adolescence, synaptic pruning in the prefrontal cortex increases, improving the efficiency of information processing, and neural connections between the prefrontal cortex and other regions of the brain are strengthened. This leads to better evaluation of risks and rewards, as well as improved control over impulses. Specifically, developments in the prefrontal cortex are important for controlling impulses and planning ahead, for decision making, and for evaluating rewards and risks. And again, throughout this, what I'm going to be making reference to frequently is the development that's going on through adolescence is what you can clearly see with your own eyes, ears, and interactions, that people clearly do not have these tools in their armory. Impulsive. How many people have you come across who are impulsive? Planning ahead. They can't plan ahead. They can't think ahead. Like a child. The child cannot plan ahead at all. They're very impulsive. They live in the moment. You have to be their planner when they're a child, pre-adolescence, because that part of the brain's just not there. They're not thinking that far ahead. Takes imagination. Childish versus mature thinking. Childish thinking, egocentric, impulsive, seeks comfort and approval, avoids responsibility, reacts emotionally. Mature thinking, self-aware, reflective, seeks truth and meaning, accepts moral duty, responds consciously, has a conscious, conscience, morality, and looks for truth and meaning. How many people do you know look for truth and meaning? It's all just, yeah, whatever. Is the football on? This shift mirrors the transition from reactive to creative consciousness, from being shaped by the world to shaping it through awareness. It fits in with that first slide of consciousness. The inner conflict. Adolescence is like an inner struggle between safety, which is the child, and freedom, which is the emerging adult. So it's a conflict. You want safety because that's what you're used to, and that's what you've been conditioned and conditioned to be used to, and you don't have to take personal responsibility because somebody's going to be there to do it for you. And then the adult is the freedom. No, I want autonomy. I can make my own decisions. I can plan ahead. I can work everything out. I understand, the meaning of things and everything that we've covered that a healthy adult would think like. Freedom, personal freedom, internal responsibility. It's the process of individuation, becoming who you truly are, separate from external expectations. You're going through an internal transition as much as an external one. The external one's obvious. The internal one, I'm just going to say most people, they couldn't even tell you what's going on internally. The 20 minutes that I've spent talking about adolescence, they probably don't know. Who knows? If this process is avoided, one remains psychologically dependent, even as an adult. Psychologically dependent. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. And it reminds that slide there. It's the famous scene out of it's The Empire Strikes Back, isn't it? Where Luke is told not by Yoda not to go in there because he won't like what he sees, and his curiosity, like a child, gets the better of him, and he has to go in there and confront whatever it is that it is. And then he thinks he's confronted by Darth Vader, and then he strikes down Darth Vader, and what's actually in there is him. This is symbolic of this sort of inner transition where you're seeing your inner flaws. That Darth Vader, it's just you, Luke. You have an inner darkness as well, which needs to be dealt with, and you need to detach from who you think you are. Cognitive development. Adolescence is a time of rapid cognitive development. Adolescence can be described as the stage of life in which the individual's thoughts start taking more of an abstract form and the egocentric thoughts decrease, allowing the individual to think and reason in a wider perspective. A combination of behavioural and MRI studies have demonstrated development of executive functions, that is, cognitive skills that enable the control and coordination of thoughts and behavior, which are generally associated with the prefrontal cortex. The thoughts, ideas, and concepts developed at this period of life greatly influence one's future life, as I was saying, playing a major role in character and personality formations. So again, impulse. Just as one example, it's, you know, the executive functions are malfunctioning. Improvements in cognitive ability. By the time individuals have reached ages 12 to 14 or so, their critical thinking and decision-making competency are compared to those of an adult. These improvements occur in 5 areas during adolescence. Attention. Improvements are seen in selective attention, this process by which one focuses on one stimulus while tuning out another. Divided attention. The ability to pay attention to 2 or more stimuli at the same time also improves. Again, how many adults cannot pay attention? You cannot keep their attention. Memory. Improvements are seen in both working memory and long-term memory. Processing speed. Adolescents think more quickly than children. Processing speed improves sharply between age 5 and middle adolescence. It then begins to level off at 14 or 15 and does not appear to change between late adolescence and adulthood. Organization. Adolescents are more aware of their thought processes and can use mnemonic devices and other strategies to think efficiently. So they're aware of their thoughts. Again, that's, you know, the raising of consciousness, becoming more self-aware and aware of your own thoughts. Metacognition. Improved knowledge of their own thinking patterns increases self-control and social insight. Sounds like an adult, doesn't it? Sounds like a healthy adult, but it doesn't sound like most of the adults I interact with. Hypothetical and abstract thinking. Adolescents' thinking is less bound to concrete events than that of children. They can contemplate possibilities outside the realm of what currently exists. One manifestation of the adolescent's increased faculty with thinking about possibilities is the improvement of skill in deduction reasoning, which leads to the development of hypothetical thinking. This provides the ability to plan ahead, see the future consequences of an action, and to provide alternative explanations of events. It also makes adolescents more skilled debaters, as they can reason against a friend's or parent's assumptions. Adolescents also develop a more sophisticated understanding of probability. I've just described a conspiracy theorist. No wonder they don't want you thinking this way. And conspiracy theorists, that's a story for another show. But that there is exactly what the system, the control system, does not want you thinking like. And people can't debate. If you've got a good debate, a good argument, because you've reasoned and you've thought ahead and you've got hypothetical thinking, and you can actually debate yourself first. You can look for the possibilities and the possible pitfalls of what it is your idea is, what it is you're thinking, your theory, whatever. You could debate yourself, and then you can take it out into the real world and try and have a conversation with somebody, and then you're ready. You've got your full armor of truth, and you know that you've got a strong argument. And as soon as people realize they're on a losing path, that's when the debate shuts down, and that's when they go into self-defense mode, into the R complex, because they're getting stressed, because they know deep down that they know nothing. I know nothing, but at least I admit it. The appearance of more systematic abstract thinking is another notable aspect of cognitive development during adolescence. For example, adolescents find it easier than children to comprehend the sorts of higher order abstract logic inherent in puns, proverbs, metaphors, and analogies. Again, I'm going to keep doing this because it's so blatantly obvious. Metaphors and analogies. I've tried this. I've tried to reason with somebody to try and get them to see something from it, even if it's just a different point of view. And you use metaphors and analogies, and you just get the glazed eye look. They're just, the lights are on, but there's no one home. And this is, it's not arrogance on my part. I'm observing this. Their increased faculty permits them to appreciate the ways in which language can be used to convey multiple messages, such as satire, metaphor, and sarcasm. Sarcasm, it's something else. People can't tell when I'm being sarcastic. Yeah, I mean, and satire is one of those things that kind of is being censored out of our culture these days. Satire, through political correctness and the like. You're not allowed to be satirical. Is that the word? Children younger than age 9 often cannot comprehend sarcasm at all. This also permits the application of advanced reasoning and logical processes to social and ideological matters such as interpersonal relationships, politics, philosophy, religion, morality, friendship, faith, fairness, and honesty. Advanced reasoning and logical processes to those things. Metacognition, thinking about thinking itself, a process referred to as metacognition, often involves monitoring one's own cognitive activity during the thinking process. Adolescents' improvement in knowledge of their own thinking pattern leads to better self-control. Self-control. This is something that we're going to pick up on as we move forward. Self-control and more effective studying. Studying? That's all any of this is. It's just studying. How many people do it? It is also relevant to social cognition, resulting in increased introspection, self-consciousness, and intellectualization, which is where a person avoids emotional stress, by focusing on logic, reasoning, and analysis. Instead of confronting uncomfortable feelings directly, they shift into a more detached cerebral mode of thinking, i.e. staying calm. Intellectualization can be useful short term in a crisis situation, but problematic if it becomes a chronic way of coping. So again, intellectualization is something which, if there's an imbalance there, obviously, and people become too imbalanced in the way that they become completely intellectualized, then, you know, they're kind of like, as a coping mechanism, they will become detached. And again, I see that a lot. So some of the pros of intellectualization, some of the pros are: helps maintain composure. Yeah, we definitely need that. Useful in high stress situations. Yeah, you definitely need that. Encourages rational thinking. You definitely need that. But the cons can lead to emotional disconnection, as I've said, may prevent healing or emotional growth, and that is definitely something that I see. Disconnected emotionally, immature in terms of emotional, infantile, thinking. No emotional intelligence, no emotions. Constrain relationships due to lack of empathy. So yeah, it goes to a lack of empathy. But if your emotions are turned off, if you're disconnected, then how on earth can you have empathy for other people? So again, this is all about balance. Being able to introspect may lead to two forms of adolescent egocentrism, which results in two distinct problems in thinking: the imaginary audience and the personal fable. Related to metacognition and abstract thought, perspective taking involves a more sophisticated theory of mind. Adolescents reach a stage of social perspective taking in which they can understand how the thoughts or actions of one person can influence those of another person, even if they personally are not involved. Again, perspective taking, empathy, it's a key part of this transition. Relativistic thinking. Compared to children, adolescents are more likely to question others' assertions. And you see where this is going. And less likely to accept facts as absolute truths. Through experience outside the family circle, they learn that rules they were taught as absolute are in fact relativistic. Relativistic, I'm going to have to practice that word. They begin moral relativism, anyone? They begin to differentiate between rules instituted out of common sense, not touching a hot stove, obviously, common sense, and those that are based on culturally relative standards, codes of etiquette, not dating until a certain age, not being allowed to drink alcohol, not being allowed to drive a car. Rules, this is all relative. These rules. A delineation that younger children do not make. Yeah, so children, they can't recognize the difference between common sense rules or objective reality, touching a hot stove, and subjective reality or subjective rules. So such as I said there, just culture, things which are embedded into culture. This can lead to a period of questioning authority in all domains. I'm not just going to believe it because some person in a fancy dress outfit tells me, or a white coat, or a talking head on the telly, or a man in a black suit. I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to work this out for myself. And again, this is key. This is not a coincidence that these things are lacking, and it's the age of adolescence, which is when these things are meant to develop, and they haven't developed in people in the main. And obviously the image I chose there is picture says 1,000 words. Identity development. A normative process of change in both content and structure of one's thoughts about the self. The two main aspects of identity development are self-clarity and self-esteem, or self-worth. Since choices made during adolescent years can influence later life, high levels of self-awareness and self-control during mid-adolescence will lead to better decisions during the transition to adulthood. Self-clarity and self-esteem. It's a period of developing a healthy identity. And again, this is no coincidence that the adolescents are being targeted for believing that they are identifying as something other than even what common sense tells you. You know, maybe you're a girl, maybe you're a boy, maybe it's fluid, maybe you're a cat, and all this madness which is going on. And this is too much for young people, adolescents. It's too much. They're already questioning their identity. It's like they're having an identity crisis, and then someone comes along and plants that nonsense in their head. If anybody wants to transition, I haven't got any problem with somebody transitioning, as long as they stay within the confines of reality in terms of what they are. I'm not buying into their shared reality in terms of you know, the rights and things like that, trampling all over people's rights just because they identify as something else. But if they want to identify, if they want to be seen as something else, fill your boots. But children, adolescents, young people, at this stage in their life, they should not be being indoctrinated into believing something which is somebody else's ideology. And they can come to their own conclusion when they're an adult, which, as we've said, that might even be when they're 30. And the identity crisis, I'll probably touch on that later. Self-concept, known as the ability of a person to have opinions and beliefs that are defined confidently, consistent and stable. Early in adolescence, cognitive developments result in greater self-awareness, greater awareness of others and their thoughts and judgments, the ability to think about abstract future possibilities, and the ability to consider multiple possibilities at once. As a result, adolescents experience a significant shift from the simple concrete and global self-descriptions typical of young children. As children, they define themselves by physical traits, whereas adolescents define themselves based on their values, thoughts and opinions. So this is a total transition away from the physical, away from the 100% physical identity, to more identifying with their thoughts, their opinions, their choices, their integrity, who they are, who they really are. And you can even tell straight away that this is a much higher level of consciousness compared to the zombie class, which I often feel that I'm surrounded by. Adolescents can conceptualize multiple possible selves that they could become and long-term possibilities and consequences of their choices. Exploring these possibilities may result in abrupt changes in self-presentation, and the adolescent chooses or rejects qualities and behaviors, trying to guide the actual self towards the ideal self, who the adolescent wishes to be, and away from the feared self, who the adolescent doesn't want to be. For many, these distinctions are uncomfortable, but they also appear to motivate achievement through behavior consistent with the ideal and distinct from the feared possible selves. So they're exploring who they are and who they want to be. This is a time where they should not be persuaded. They should be supported. How many parents impose their own wishes on their children and who they want them to be, because they see them as an extension of themselves. They see them as their little slave. They live their life through them because they never grew up, they never matured, and they want to, like I said, they want their child to be an extension of them. They want them to adopt the ID that they want them to have, not the identity that the actual young person is going through. It's a hugely, hugely important time. Sense of identity and self-esteem. Egocentrism in adolescence forms a self-conscious desire to feel important in their peer groups and enjoy social acceptance. Conformists. Unlike the conflicting aspects of self-concept, identity represents a coherent sense of self, stable across circumstances and including past experiences and future goals. Everybody has a self-concept, whereas Erik Erikson argued that not everyone fully achieves identity. Erikson's theory of stages of development include the identity crisis, in which adolescents must explore different possibilities and integrate different parts of themselves before committing to their beliefs. He described the resolution of this process as a stage of identity achievement, but also stressed that the identity challenge is never fully resolved once and for all at one point in time. Adolescents begin by defining themselves based on their crowd membership. So they look to the crowd first. They want to fit in, but eventually they will start to discover and explore who they really are. Modern life takes place amidst a never-ending barrage of flesh on screens, pages and billboards. This barrage consciously or subconsciously registers into the mind causing issues with self-image, a factor that contributes to an adolescent's sense of identity. This is so obvious, and I know people will totally know this already, but you know, these young people are constantly being made to feel like they're not good enough on a physical, in terms of their physical appearance, be it weight or how pretty they are, how good looking they are, how big their muscles are, whatever. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense, and it's to completely destroy. It's intentional to destroy the adolescent's sense of self-worth. And any moral society with integrity would have checks and balances in place for what young people are subject to. And there's not, they're completely bombarded with all sorts of propaganda, but also this sort of, you know, self-image harmful material. Self-esteem. Self-esteem is defined as one's thoughts and feelings about one's self-concept and identity. Most theories on self-esteem state that there is a grand desire across all genders and ages to maintain, protect and enhance their self-esteem. Well, there is, because the more self-worth you have, or self-respect, the less likely you're going to allow somebody to control you. Barometric self-esteem fluctuates rapidly and can cause severe distress and anxiety, but baseline self-esteem remains highly stable across adolescence. The validity of global self-esteem scales has been questioned, and many suggest that more specific scales might reveal more about the adolescent's experience. Self-esteem, self-worth, validation, it's all common sense, really, as to how to help a young person grow through this period. And obviously this is, you know, I've got a 15-year-old daughter, so I'm not, you know, this is a key point in my development as a father figure. Learning how to help somebody through adolescence. Surely I've got to have these tools to be able to help somebody go through it. I can't fix somebody's leaky roof if I don't have any tools. Autonomy. The degree to which adolescents are perceived as autonomous beings varies widely by culture, as do the behaviours that represent this emerging autonomy. Psychologists have identified three main types of autonomy: emotional independence, behavioural independence, and cognitive independence. Thoughts, emotions, actions, all in unison, all free of any controls, external controls. Emotional autonomy is defined in terms of an adolescent's relationships with others, and often includes the development of more mature emotional connections with adults and peers. Behavioural autonomy encompasses an adolescent's developing ability to regulate their own behaviour, to act on personal decisions, and to self-govern. Cultural differences are especially visible in this category because it concerns issues of dating, social, time with peers, and time management decisions. So again, the culture or the environment has a lot to do with the development. Cognitive autonomy describes the capacity for an adolescent to partake in processes of independent reasoning and decision making without excessive reliance on social validation. This is the opposite to the conformist. The Ash conformity experiment comes to mind. I don't need social validation. It's obvious which line is the longest line. I covered that in one of my obedience, I think it might have been. The Ash conformity, well worth a watch. Converging influences from adolescent cognitive development, expanding social relationships, an increased adult-like appearance, and the acceptance of more rights and responsibilities enhance feelings of autonomy for adolescents. Proper development of autonomy has been tied to good mental health. High self-esteem, self-motivated tendencies, positive self-conception, not self-loathing, and self-initiating and regulating behaviours. A well-regulated human being. Well-regulated. Again, don't see much of that about. And you don't have to scratch beneath much beneath the surface to tap into what's going on behind the glossy exterior of somebody. It doesn't take that much. You don't have to spend that much time with somebody to start to join the dots, see patterns. Belief system development. Adolescence is frequently characterized by a transformation of an adolescent's understanding of the world, the rational direction towards a life course, and the active seeking of new ideas rather than the unquestioning acceptance of adult authority. This is where the rebellion comes in. They don't want to just blindly accept unquestioningly the authority figure, and they rebel, and so they should, rightly so, they should rebel. And it's said that they rebel against their parents. Well, I'll be careful what I say, but we haven't experienced any rebellion as of yet, touch wood, because if you treat them like an adult, they will treat you like an adult. Equals. Respect breeds self-respect and mutual respect, and in a nutshell, that's all that is. To stop a child rebelling, it obviously, you've got to do a good job all the way, best you can. Nobody's perfect. I'm not saying we're perfect, but at the end of the day, she's been given all of the tools and all of the respect, and we're not an authority. She doesn't see us as an authority. She doesn't see her as lesser. She sees herself as an equal who is just a little bit less mature than us. And that came out in that presentation, in that slide. She knows that she's still maturing. We don't give her petty rules. We give her autonomy at the right level of maturity, not age, level of maturity. She is handed autonomy, and she understands that if she breaks trust, that she loses privileges. She doesn't lose any rights, she loses privileges. Made that very clear to her. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's you know, it's it is relevant. I infamously once said to her when she was, I don't know, single digits, 9 or something, I said to her, I'll never ground you. And this is not because I'm a walkover. This is not because I'm trying to buy her affection. I said to her, she's about 9-year-old, and I said, I'll never ground you. And she's looking at us with, to start with, she looks, you know, like, oh, can I get away with anything? I said, I'll never ground you. I'll take away your privileges. The things which you don't have any right to, they are privileges. If you betray or break trust, if you make any mistakes, I'll you know, you might not be allowed friends over for a period of time, and until we work the trust back. You know, you might not be allowed to have as big a contract for data usage on your mobile phone, because that's a privilege. It's not a right. So I might roll that back. You get what I'm saying. You take away privileges. I don't take away a right. I don't have a right to imprison her in her home. We've been there, haven't we? We've all been grounded for a good 2 years recently, like children. I don't have a right to do that. What I have a responsibility to keep her safe until she can keep herself as reasonably safe as one would expect, given that there is no such thing as safety, eternal safety, as she pointed out. My responsibility is to keep her as safe as I can until she can stand on her own 2 feet. And if she's, the only time I would ground her, I've just said I would never ground her. It wouldn't be grounding, it would be if she did something completely reckless, if she went out and did something completely reckless, so she was a danger to herself or to others. So if she went out, if she had some sort of personality where she was a danger to herself or others, then I wouldn't let her out. That's a responsibility. I'm not taking away her right at that age. That would be reckless. But you know, things which are just disobeying a rule, or making a mistake which, you know, it has to have consequences. But I'm not going to imprison her in the home. I wouldn't do that. I don't have the right. Once she gets to a certain age, I don't have the right to take away her freedom. I have a responsibility to make sure she's responsible. That went on about that too long, but I'm not sure I know about any parents who would say that, and I thought I was taking a risk, and I've never grounded her. And my mum disagreed with this, me saying it, but we debated it, and she kind of agreed with my philosophy, and just didn't think I should have said it to her. But we've never grounded her, and she's made, I would say, one mistake where it really was a big mistake, and she knew about it. She knew she had done something. She knew she had lost trust, and we did take away some privileges for however long, and she's never made the mistake again, or anything on a similar size, or any mistake where I've really had to be angry with her, to be honest. So she seems to be going through adolescence in the way I would want her to, and she seems to be at the correct part of her journey, healthy journey. An adolescent begins to develop a unique belief system through their interaction with social, familial and cultural environments. While organized religion is not necessarily a part of every adolescent's life experience, youth are still held responsible for forming a set of beliefs about themselves, the world around them, and whatever higher powers they may or may not believe in, such as morality or natural law. They're starting to tap into something else. They're starting to look beyond the authority figure. This process is often accompanied or aided by cultural traditions that intend to provide a meaningful tradition to adulthood through ceremony, ritual, confirmation, or rite of passage or initiation. So some cultures, this is how important this transition is. It has ceremonies, rituals, and the like. What do? Get us out of school, do some exams, get a job, vote, be a slave. Vote? Did I say vote? Vote? Yeah. That's your autonomy. That's you expressing your autonomy. You're free to choose. The rite of passage and the failure of initiation. Traditional cultures used rites of passage to guide youth through symbolic death of the child self. It's like a rebirth, isn't it? Born again. Modern society lacks this, leaving many uninitiated. The result, perpetual adolescence, adults who remain emotionally immature and spiritually asleep. The rebirth, the second coming, has not happened. Perpetual adolescence is the result. I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that to pre-adolescence. Most people are so lacking in any of these things we're talking about. It's like they've never even started. Without this initiation, the ego hardens as a defense mechanism. If you don't have the tools to go through this initiation, if you're not equipped and you don't have the support, the validation, and a teacher, if you like, who can guide you, who's been through it themselves, who understands it, then it's like the ego hardening is like a protection mechanism, because it's too painful. It's a painful process. It's awkward. You don't know what's going on. You're confused. Hormones, blah blah blah. This ego hardening is a form of spiritual armor. It protects but also imprisons. It's to protect the child because they're not ready. The abandonment of the true self. I think I've missed the word self off that slide. The abandonment of the true self. The uninitiated adolescent learns to mask their authentic self to fit into a fragmented world. This creates a false identity built on fear, social roles, and external validation. The true self, the inner, spontaneous, creative nature, is buried. The consciousness remains retarded, not by lack of intelligence, but by disconnection from being. So the true self, the inner self, it's buried. The false identity fear-based, external validation, social approval, that false sense of identity takes over. And this is based purely on the material world, or the masculine energy of consciousness, which is all about, it if left unchecked, and if the spiritual side or the emotional side of the brain doesn't develop fully, properly, then the logic, masculine energy force takes over, and it works hand in hand with the R complex, the fear-based actions, ego-driven, overly materialistic, controlling, dominating. And this lack of emotional development is the retardation. They haven't fully developed. They have been held back. One part of the development is being held back, the emotional side. You could compare this abandonment of the true self to the fall from Eden, a symbolic loss of innocence and authenticity through identification with the ego rather than the soul. Consequences of ego-driven development: anxiety, alienation, nihilism, symptoms of lost connection with inner truth. Society mirrors this with collective immaturity, chasing pleasures, status, and distraction. Distraction from the emptiness inside because they have a false sense of self. Without initiation, consciousness stays split. Intellect without wisdom, knowledge without morality. One hour 25 already. The path to true maturity. True maturity is integration, not suppression. Reconnecting with the true self requires self-knowledge and shadow work, a deep look within, a dark night of the soul. I've been trying to understand what that phrase means, and it sounds very much like a rebirth. You really got to look deep inside and question who you really are. And who wants to do that in their 30s, 40s, 50s? It obviously happens at an age where there's not too much, hardened ego thinking. It happens when the brain is still in development, and it's happening perfectly at the right time. A dark night of the soul. Moral responsibility and compassion is part of the path. It's never too late to complete the initiation consciously. People have got to recognize what they are and recognize what they're not. And they've got to want to change. They've got to want to do this work, hard work. Going through this, as I said, at a certain age is it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be nice. It's going to be pretty grim. I believe I went through this Night of the Dark Soul. I believe I went through that in 2020. I'm not going to go into that too much. I'll save that for another episode. But it's painful, and I wasn't that bad. My identity to my ego wasn't that bad. I understood. I had a good understanding of morality, not good enough, and emotional intelligence, empathy. But yeah, I you know, when you can be shocked into it, triggered into going one way or the other. You either go through the painful initiation of realizing what's actually going on, and the pain of realization, and starting to look at yourself first. How did we get here? It starts within. It's never too late. Conclusion: adolescence is the fire through which the child must pass to become human. Remember, it's the human brain which is developing, the seat of consciousness. Growing up means dying to illusion and awakening to truth. The task of life to remember who we are beneath conditioning. Those who complete the inner initiation become guides for others, helping awaken humanity from its collective adolescence. So, yeah, you can become a guide for others, not just children or young people who you happen to be the parent of, but other adolescents other adults who clearly are retarded to one degree or another, or have arrested development. I came across this, which I thought was quite apt. The formal study of adolescent psychology began with the publication of G. Stanley Hall's Adolescence in 1904. Hall, who was the first president of the American Psychological Association, defined adolescence to be the period of life from 14 to 24, and viewed it primarily as the time of internal turmoil and upheaval. He believed that adolescence was a presentation of our human ancestors, a phylogenetic shift from being primitive to being civilized. Adolescence was inherently a time of disturbance and psychological confusion, and that is what an awakening is, and it's painful. That's a true awakening. Okay, that ends part 1. We'll have a quick break, and we'll see you in part 2.
Element of mystery which puzzles many people in my view.
have to be very careful what you say.
We regret if the implications of what you've seen are less than optimistic for the future of life on this planet. It has been our task, however, to present the facts as we understand them.